Hello, everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. I am Kenneth Amaduri, and I'm joined today with a returning guest, someone we talked to in the heart in March, the end of March of this COVID pandemic mess of a year, 2020, Hollywood scripted, Twilight Zone, lockdown still around, the economy, the progressive agenda, the tyranny that's coming from the top down over a virus that was supposed to kill 3% of the population that is now a 99.9% survival rate. Sure, people are getting infected, and we've seen the fallout from that. And it's not all, rainbows and butterflies. Absolutely. It's been a difficult thing to deal with. But the responses we've seen from government, the impacts on the economy, it will be forever noticed here going forward, in my opinion, and the implications are stark. So to join me in discussion on this from the last time we discussed all of this is Jerry Robinson of followthemoney.com. He's a great guest, someone who really understands what's going on in the economy and has been discussing momentum trading. And my goodness, what a time to be doing that with markets in volatility mode. It's a great time to make some money in momentum trading. So Jerry, thanks so much for coming on the show with me today.
It's an honor to be back on. Thank you, Kenneth.
Jerry, let's start off with just your thoughts from our last interview up until now. The insane amount of money printing we've seen flow right into the stock market, and just your thoughts on what we've seen and what we're seeing now with this presidential election, the volatility, the uncertainty. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's been quite a ride, hasn't it? This year has been a wild ride, and the latter half probably could not be predicted from looking at the first half. Probably anybody who thought that they would see the kind of economic, or perhaps we should say market response that we've seen to the current public health crisis and to the governmental response to it. It has been really wild. I've never seen anything like it, Kenneth. I've been a trader. I traded my first stock in 1996, 1997, somewhere in there. Traded my first option in 2002, and I bought my first cryptocurrency in 2012. And I've been an active trader, day trader, swing trader, position trader at different times in my career. Today, I'm a part-time position trader. During the last 25 years, I traded through the dot-com bubble. I traded through the 2008 crash and the ensuing rally. I've never seen anything like this, of course. The amount of money that's been printed to enable this response has been nothing short of incredible and breathtaking. In the month of June, for example, the United States spent more money than it did in the prior 2 centuries combined. In the month of June, in 1 month. Did I say that? It was in 30 days.
That's insane.
In June that we spent more money in 1 month than we have over the first 2 centuries. Strangely quiet during this period of massive monetary stimulus has been the usual suspects, Kenneth. The Tea Party, for example, has been nowhere to be found. The fiscal conservatives, which normally have a really loud voice in times like these, nowhere to be found. And it's quite interesting, in fact. But we can make one prediction, and I'm not fond of predictions. I'm not fond of forecast, because I follow the money, I follow the trend. But I think we can make one prediction or forecast absolutely with absolute certainty. And that is that the day that Mr. Joe Biden sits down into the Oval Office, the Tea Party will return, maybe January 21st, 22nd, somewhere in that time frame. We will begin to see the people who have been hiding under a rock come back out and suddenly begin to protest this massive amount of money printing, this massive amount of spending, which has become outrageous. And now our grandkids have to pay for it. We'll hear, though they've been quiet for the last 40 years. So we would expect and make a forecast that in beginning sometime in the middle of January, maybe towards the end of January, we'll begin to see and hear about how terrible the amount of spending and printing has really been. Up until this point, we really haven't heard too much about it, except to perhaps block new fiscal stimulus from being distributed to poorer people. But we really haven't heard too much about the insane amount of money printing, which, let me stress, this is very positive for gold and silver and anything that relies upon cognizance of our spending problems. Our spending problems, again, have been submerged underneath the water. There's really not been any discussion about how we're going to pay for this the way that there normally is. But that will return. And again, we expect it to return literally within the next few weeks. So, going forward, I think it's really quite stunning to see that gold and silver have risen in this environment, Kenneth, without the typical enabling voices of the Tea Party and the fiscal conservatives, which typically egg on the rally in gold. So in other words, we don't see a whole lot of gold commercials on Fox News like we did, say, in 2009. I'm not getting flyers in the mail about how I need to buy gold as I did in 2009. But yet, despite all of that, gold has hit a new all-time high. And so I think 2021 is going to be incredible for both gold and silver investors. So for things like Bitcoin, which we've been long for seven years or so on, and also bearish for the dollar. We would expect the dollar, we put out a comment the other day that the dollar certainly doesn't have much strength going into 2021. And it wouldn't be surprising to see the dollar lose quite a bit of value in 2021, especially as it's hitting new multi-month lows in December as we speak. So when I look forward, without a crystal ball, I see the return of fiscal conservatism, which has been hiding for 4 years, conveniently. And I see, of course, the rise of fiscal conservatism building the case, which has largely been quiet, for owning gold and owning silver, and even owning, things like Bitcoin. So those are my comments. The economy is certainly in a world of hurt, but it seems as if the Fed is ready to continue to paper over our problems, even as we have incredible demand for food coming from, poor segments of our society. Many people have lost the amount of pay they've made. They've seen pay cuts. It's been a very difficult time for so many people. And as we head into 2021, we would expect that may get played up a bit more than it has been in 2020 from those who have been fairly quiet on the topic up until now.
Yeah, it's interesting. And people are blinded by their own political biases. And it's hard to disparage someone when they're on your team. It's almost like there's an aspect of, hey, I know my wife has some problems, but I'm not going to bash her in public. And I know that's a bad analogy for who we have in office, but that's who we are as humans. We protect the people who are on our side, if you will. And I know you don't get into too much into the right and left politics of things, but I think it's interesting. And I think it's telling us to what is happening in our media and in our censorship and just the mainstream narrative. Fox News largely, outperformed CNN and all these other more opposite news networks in 2016, helping President Trump in this election. And Zero Hedge reports today, and we already saw this, after the November 3rd election here in 2020, Newsmax ratings surpassed Fox News. And we know Fox News is underperforming CNN at the moment. And it's just interesting. It's interesting to see this dynamic of media and people looking for alternatives that are just going to cover what is going on. I mean, I'm not saying Newsmax is the end all be all or perfect, or OAN is the end all be all, but it does seem less like they're trying to hide certain topics. They're just covering what is going on and what's happening with the election, with their biases, of course. But it's just interesting how there seems to be a coordinated bias on the mainstream news outlets. So just some thoughts, general thoughts on what we're seeing with censorship, with Facebook, with YouTube, and just what this means for the economy going forward, if anything.
Well, I think this is where the promise of decentralization comes into play. For example, with cryptocurrencies, with many of the different decentralized blockchain projects, you really can't censor, what's being said or what's being done. And so in many ways, in a centralized system, you have to expect censorship. That's the same way if I walk into a restaurant without a shirt on. I have a right not to wear a shirt, right? But I don't have a right to not wear a shirt in somebody's restaurant. Well, I can make a big deal about that. I could say, you know what? People died for my right to be able to not wear a shirt. And if I so choose, I can walk into a restaurant and not wear a shirt, right? But the restaurant owner says that's not going to work. And in fact, society at large says, no, that's not, you don't have a right to not wear a shirt, right? So we all seem to have things in common that we agree that shouldn't be done. And for example, even with YouTube and Facebook, I've always viewed these as third-party platforms, that have terms and conditions. So I didn't build, our website, followthemoney.com, back in 2010. I didn't build it on Facebook because Facebook makes Facebook's rules. And if I don't like Facebook's rules, then I got a big problem because there's nobody's going to care. Facebook makes their own rules. Twitter makes their own rules. LinkedIn makes their own rules. And in fact, based upon things like Citizens United and things like that we've already, seen, kind of brought to the light in the Supreme Court and things like that, the, corporations are people, right? They have rights too. And so YouTube has a right as a person, according to Citizens United, if you agree with that line of logic, to have its opinion about me and what I'm saying. And so, again, this is why we've seen the rise of alternatives, like you've mentioned, some of these alternative, news sources, and also some of the alternative, websites and social networks. So I don't think you can please everybody. People kind of move, as you point, according to their own political beliefs. Those political beliefs are not inbred in them from birth. They're apprehended by what they're exposed to. So if you grow up in a house that listens to Fox News, well, you're probably going to think like Fox News. If you grow up in a house that listens to MSNBC, then you're probably going to lean more towards that. If you grow up in a house that's Baptist, well, you tend to disagree with the Presbyterians. It doesn't really matter. We are products of our upbringing. We're products of the philosophies of our family and the philosophies of our professors and the philosophies of our preachers and the philosophies of talking heads on TV who spout things. But don't forget that all of these media outlets are all for profit. So they all make money, saying what they say. And if they can increase the amount of money that they'll make, well, they'll steer towards that. And let's not forget, Kenneth, that's the kind of world that you and I, live in, and that people want. They want corporations to put shareholders first. It's a law. So if a news media outlet decides to say things that are incorrect, but it leads to more profit and it helps shareholders, well, Kenneth, shareholders are the ones that have to be served. So if it maximizes profit, how can it really be against the law in many ways? Now, some things are, but think about all the things that big banks do, Kenneth, that we would say these are completely egregious and unethical and immoral, but it's good for shareholders. And that's all that matters. It's the same thing with news media. You know, the stuff, the garbage we put in our ears on a daily basis, all of this propaganda that comes from the right, comes from the left. It means nothing to us. It doesn't mean anything to us. I mean, where I'm at right now, I got off the grid, you know, many years ago, and I'm out on a piece of property away from, you know, much of this madness. And every day, you know, what's happening in the news media, I don't see it. When I walk outside of my house, come out of my little woods, whenever I go up to the local, you know, restaurant, or well, I don't go inside, but you know, when I go up to the local, you know, businesses here, I don't see people throwing rocks into buildings. You know, I don't see the things that I see on TV. And when we live our lives in a way that allows the propaganda, either by the right or the left, to dictate our reality, you know, we become slaves. And so I find that turning off both the right and the left media is helpful, for the number of hairs I still have left on my head. I find it to be helpful for my heart. I find it to be helpful for my health. I find it to be helpful for my relationships. So I turn those things off. I don't listen to what, you know, the right says. I could care less what Fox News has to say. I could care less what CNN has to say. I just don't care. Those, you know, they literally have a profit motive. All of them, not just one side.
Right.
They all are driven by profit and maximizing shareholder value, period. That's a law. That's what they have to do. If they don't pursue maximum shareholder value, Kenneth, they break the law. So they have to do what's good for shareholders. And if boosting ratings by telling lies, you know, is good for shareholders, well, then bring it on. And I think that's what we've seen. So the best solution for that is not to find, you know, a right-wing outlet that you know, counters the left narrative, but instead to reject both narratives, because both of them are bankrupting our country. Nothing on the right is saving our country. Nothing on the left is saving our country. So we don't have to choose one of these. In fact, if you look at George Washington said, I hope there are no political parties. Political parties have destroyed our country.
So true. And it's we've gotten so far away from the Constitution in both parties, where you just think about the mess when it comes to politics. Somebody who might be conservative or you know, might be interested in, you know, limited government. And again, it's, you know, we can get into whether or not the right and the left actually believe in these things, but you know, they might vote something else because you know, they want to legalize marijuana, or they want to do something else that is just so uncorrelated and so disconnected from just some of the things that I feel should be the responsibilities of the people at the top, and very limited reaches into the various other aspects of our lives that should largely be at the local levels. And it's just such a dysfunction. And just watching the madness happen, the election frauds, and then the discords between what is going on in the country, it is beyond anything I would have expected, I guess, just a few years ago. I mean, we've really seemed like a third world banana republic with the things that the president of the United States is tweeting about and accusing this country of. It's unreal to me. But here we are. So, because of that, what are your thoughts on the economy, the results of this? I mean, in a general way, how do you think this is going to impact the stock market and our finances going forward?
Well, it's going to be tough, clearly. Think back to the to March, whenever the policies were being bantered about and being made. And, for those who think that there's a free market side, of the political aisle, I'd like to know which side that was, because I don't recall any free market solutions being proposed at the depths back in March. In fact, I remember quite the opposite. In fact, I remember a full-blown government intervention in every way possible being bantered about by both parties and then being approved. I remember hearing that governments wanted to give big corporations lots of money. And I remember that the president didn't block or veto that bill.
Right.
In fact, he wanted it. And in fact, I don't remember too many Republicans vetoing that bill and instead saying, no, let's give money to big corporations. Let's do that. So
A lot of hands were wide open accepting money, right?
That's right. And so remember that there was no free market solution to the public health crisis. Not only was there not any kind of free market solution implemented, there wasn't a free market solution proposed. Now, you would expect that if there is a free market party, that you would have had a free market solution at least proposed and then rejected. But there was, for all of this clamor and all of this stress about coming socialism, this has been one of my joys to listen to, with great irony, that somehow, socialism is coming to America and we all have to fear this. Well, socialism is it's really a reaction to capitalism. You wouldn't have socialism if you didn't have capitalism, right? Just like you wouldn't have Protestants unless you had Catholics. I mean, this is a reaction.
That's interesting. That's a real, and not to cut you off, but that's an interesting point. But I would say a pure capitalist society, and I think you might agree with that, is more ideal than where we are now. And, I think you're critiquing what we have now as socialism. And it's interesting because having capitalism and then socialism creeping in, that it's like a disease, and that's what we have. And we're trending towards that. It's an uphill battle to go towards capitalism. It's downhill, easy ride to trend towards socialism.
Well, perhaps, but let me clarify let me clarify the last words, because I don't mean to offend anyone when I say what I had said, especially those of a Protestant persuasion. But specifically, the Catholics were what the Protestants were protesting. The Protestant faith finds its identity in protest. Protest to what? Protest to the earth? Protest to the sky? No, protest to the Catholic Church. So the Protestant is a product of the Catholic Church. His identity is in protesting the Catholic Church. That is his identity. The identity of the socialist is in countering the extreme capitalism. So socialism isn't an ism that existed before capitalism. It's an ism that is a reaction to capitalism. It's a reaction. It's a criticism of capitalism. So socialism has become, I think, in many ways larger than it really is. Socialism is a critique of capitalism, and capitalism should be critiqued. Now, maybe it shouldn't be critiqued in the way that socialism does it. Maybe socialism isn't the proper critique. Maybe there's a better critique. But in fact, everything that critiques capitalism can't be automatically bad, because that would be to automatically assume that capitalism is perfect. And we know that there's no ism that man has created that's perfect. So socialism is a reaction to capitalism. And socialism, as you pointed out, is easier. It's easier for politicians to simply, print money and give it to whoever they decide needs it. And according to the government, they think that big rich corporations need lots more money than the average poor person on the street. In fact, these people tend to spend a lot of time, who are against socialism, making sure that poor people don't get money, but making sure that the rich get lots of welfare. The corporate welfare in the United States is off the charts. But as far as the economy and how all of this is probably going to play out, I think the way forward, I would expect, would be simply a continuing decline here in the United States and a continuing ascendancy of China. China has won the economic battle. It's not even close. In fact, whenever China just released its latest export figures, it showed that it had replaced the United States as the top trading partner with the European Union. It's already the largest economy in the world based upon GDP on a PPP basis, which is much more important and relevant than, say, a nominal basis. And that happened back in 2014. China is advanced in 5G. It's already launching 6G satellites into space. It's already advanced us and leapfrogged us with drone technology. It's leapfrogged us with computing power and quantum computing. I mean, it's simply incredible. So the United States, while defending some sort of supposed free market, has fallen so far behind its greatest competitor, China. And we would expect to continue to see China rise and expect to continue to see the United States fall. Now, that's dangerous. That's dangerous because in cases like that, we think of guys like Graham Allison, who wrote the book, The Thucydides Trap. When you have such a situation where your reigning power is losing power and an ascendant power is rising to replace it, that tends to lead to war. So it wouldn't be surprising to see some sort of incursion between the United States and China, albeit probably a proxy war, just as the US and the Soviet Union did for many decades with Vietnam or Korea or whatever. So we would expect to see at least proxy wars break out between the United States and China, and potentially eventually an all-out war. The United States is bankrupt. I wrote a book called Bankruptcy of Our Nation. It's bankrupt. They can't pay their bills. Every single month we are borrowing to the tune of about $1 trillion. We're borrowing quite a bit of money, but every single year we are running well over, $1 trillion deficit, meaning that we have to borrow $1 trillion to keep the lights on every single year, at least. And in fact, it's much more than that this year, like something like $3 or $4 trillion. And it's going to continue on all the way to 2030. So how this free market economy, Kenneth, can continue to borrow at the clip that it's borrowing, and borrowing, in fact, from countries like China, who are, in China's case, it's the largest creditor nation on the face of the planet. How this continues is a mystery. It really is a mystery as to how the United States can stay afloat in this environment. And I think it won't. I think that we'll just continue to see as you pointed out, a third world nation or a banana republic. Well, I would say that's how many countries are viewing us right now. Many countries are shocked and dismayed. We help missionary work in Africa. I have a ministry as well, in addition to followthemoney.com, Christian ministry. And we receive notes from Zimbabwe or from Tanzania that basically tell us that they're praying for our nation. They don't know what happened, but they're praying for our nation. Out of all the nations that have dealt with this public health crisis, I would say the United States, A, of course, has had the worst outcome, but B, has also suffered needlessly the most, most. And it doesn't really matter where you point the finger, whether you point the finger at the right or the left for this. They really have. If we could go back in time, I think most Americans would say we probably should do this differently. And both sides could learn from what's happened and transpired this year. but I doubt they will.
No, I tend to agree with you. And it's interesting to see the world as we have it here in 2020. I think the tyranny, the lockdowns, I mean, the precedents for what we have going on will only ramp up the increase in government and government's role in our lives as a precedence with what we've seen this year in 2020. And good for you for being off the grid and living in an area where you're largely unaffected. You know, you're feeling that way, at least unaffected by what is going on in the news. And it's just, we see that, you know, you look at the cities, LA, New York, you know, here I live not too far from Austin, outside of the city, in an area I do feel away and grateful. But it's just crazy to see how the world has changed. And, you know, an area like where you live now, I'm sure has actually, it now has a premium because of what we're seeing in the world
Wow.
and as it changes so quickly. So thoughts on that? I mean, as we're kind of getting to that point where I want to wrap up the interview, but let's talk about, you know, maybe some comments on that. And then, you know, talk about gold and silver and their role as we're seeing, you know, everything unravel the way they are.
Hmm. Well, I think, being off the grid as much as possible has been was a long-term goal of myself and my wife, and we did it back in we began the process back around 2012. About the same time we learned about Bitcoin, we were moving through a process where we said we really got to get off the grid. We've got to do something here, and that was when I was living in the middle of a big city. I was living in the middle of Houston, Texas at the time. And we packed our bags and we found a property over the course of a couple of years that suited our needs, had water sources, had plenty of land for, growing food or whatever else, livestock, and, a few buildings and things like that. And I think that's, that everybody can't do that. Not everybody can just up and leave. So you can shelter in place. You can learn how to do that in your own city. And especially now, we're seeing a big increase in demand for, as you mentioned, properties that suit that bill, that meet that bill. If people do want to get out of the city, I have seen the property values around, where we are and the types of properties that we have just really go up in value. It's been really something and stunning. We've also been acquiring more real estate in this environment because the interest rates are so low, and we're not buying in Miami Beach. We're not buying condos in Miami Beach. We're not buying, $3 million houses in suburbs of LA. We are buying, very, very reasonable, cheap properties in middle America where many people have ignored up until now. And so, that's one of our strategies as real estate. I think it's, I think it's a wise investment in addition to stocks, in addition to gold and silver, in addition to cryptocurrencies. Real estate makes up about 40% of my total assets, my total investable assets. And so I do like real estate. It's done very well. I would expect that it's probably going to continue to do well for those who invest properly, those who invest, who don't overbuy, who invest in right areas. The demand for housing will always exist. So if you can find good, affordable housing in a good area, I think it's a good place to be. But I would think it's better than the bond market personally, going forward. I'm not a friend of the bond market here as we head into the next decade for sure. I'm surprised prices are still where they are. And then as far as gold and silver go, so we are bullish on gold. I put out an idea on gold many months back, and just based upon the technicals, just literally based upon the technicals and the demand, I think that you could see a $5,000 gold price. Now, again, I'm not making some sort of outlandish claim that's going to happen. I'm just saying that based upon the technicals, based upon the chart itself, and based upon prior runs in price rallies, I think a $5,000 gold price is not out of question. And I think silver will also do well for an abundant number of other reasons. But I think to over leverage in gold and silver would be a mistake. Even though we teach that gold is money, even though we teach that gold and silver are excellent hedges against the growing threat of ongoing inflation, but particularly even more pernicious inflation, gold and silver play a role. But I would say that, personally, we teach our students not to be over leveraged in any one asset. Not and to be nothing should really make up more than 50% of your total investable assets, in my opinion. That's my opinion. But so that's how we approach. Now, another thing that I think is going to do very well is cryptocurrency. Bitcoin's the best performing asset of the 21st century. I learned about Bitcoin back in 2012 from a friend of mine by the name of Trace Mayer. He turned me on to it. I'm so glad that he did. I started acquiring it back then. Bitcoin has done very well, and we believe that Bitcoin is going to continue to do well into the new decade. So I personally allocate 5 cents out of every dollar into cryptocurrencies. I've already built up a cryptocurrency portfolio of many of the smaller altcoins over the last several years. Now I just mainly focus on building my own Bitcoin holdings. I take a nickel out of every dollar that I have to invest and I put it into Bitcoin, a nickel. So if it all goes away, if it all goes poof, oh well, I won't be living underneath a bridge, hopefully, if that happens. So I'll still have 95 cents out of every investable dollar that I could have put somewhere else. But by not exposing myself to Bitcoin, I would have missed out on a tremendous rally. And I think by not remaining exposed to Bitcoin, I'm going to miss out on a tremendous rally yet to come due to the finite nature. The inflation rate, Kenneth, of Bitcoin is lower than gold. That happened this year. That happened in May with the halving. That was not a fact before May of 2020. But now the inflation rate of Bitcoin is now literally below that of gold. They're pulling more gold. It's easier to go find gold than it is to mine Bitcoin now as of May 2020 because of the halving. And that's going to continue to increase. So there's a planned inflation schedule for Bitcoin that goes all the way out to 2140 when the last final Bitcoins are mined. Wall Street's just now waking up to this. They're thinking, wow, we live in this world of infinite money supply, literally. But Bitcoin's finite, right? And so those who own gold and silver should see this writing on the wall, that they should understand that Bitcoin was created as in reaction to the Federal Reserve's actions in 2008. It's literally in the white paper of Bitcoin. It was made because of the Fed. The Fed was you wouldn't have Bitcoin without the Fed. So Bitcoin was created because of the Fed, and it was created to counter this inflationary monetary supply that we have. And so when we have, Bitcoin with a finite number of 21 million that will ever be mined, and that probably 3 million of them have already been lost forever, gone. That leaves you with very few. And now you have companies like PayPal and MicroStrategy and Paul Tudor Jones, and guys like even the head of BlackRock, saying that this looks like a legitimate asset. You've only got 8. If every millionaire wants to have one, they can't. So it's one of these rare opportunities, I think, even at current prices, where we may get 20 years down the road and we won't believe what has happened to the price of Bitcoin. Now, it's hard to know which one's going to win. Let me say this in conclusion, Kenneth, is that back in 1999, when I was trading the dot-com bubble, it was wild. And there were companies back then that don't exist today. I'm trying to think of a few that I remember back then. There was one called iBuy, really popular company called iBuy. There were many of these little companies that they aren't here. But there were other companies too, companies called Amazon and companies called eBay, right? Some of these other companies that were, maybe eBay wasn't back during that time, but they came fairly close after. So you had a lot of these companies that are still around. So when I look at Bitcoin and Ethereum and all of these cryptocurrencies, I tend to think of the late 1990s, realizing that some will survive and some will not. And we may have a washout of many of these cryptocurrencies, relatively speaking. But 20 years from now, I would expect that the ones that do survive will be much, much, much higher even than they currently are now, because we are moving into a world where we are going to have a digital currency. China is already, launching its digital yuan in a limited way. They've been working on it since 2014. The Fed's talking about a digital dollar. Europe's talking about a digital euro. So we'll all be kind of, introduced to the value of digital currency. And when that happens, when people are actually using digital dollars or digital euros or digital yuan, it will be then and then really for the first time that people see, well, how much more valuable is Bitcoin than this digital dollar?
Hmm.
So when we finally have all of these digital currencies, we will then realize the value of having finite digital currencies. And I think that's why some of us are already, in those digital currencies, preparing for a much, much higher wave as more people get turned on to what digital currencies are and begin to use them at the behest of the governments. But then when they start thinking about it, they'll say, do I want to hold this digital dollar, or do I want to hold this, this digital crypto, this coin, maybe Bitcoin or Ethereum? Which one would I rather hold my money in? And so right now, many people are like, what is digital? I don't even know what a digital dollar would be, or what is it, what are cryptocurrencies? But later, after we all know what digital coins are, digital dollars are, digital euros are, we will then begin to have the understanding of, well, these finite digital currencies make a lot of sense. Well, they've long made sense, and they're going to make much more sense to people once they see how inflated their digital dollar or their digital euro or their digital yuan is.
Jerry Robinson, everyone, of followthemoney.com. Jerry, my goodness, you're such a wealth of knowledge and information, and I love your nuance. And I like that you are above the fray. You don't get into the mud with the politics of both the right and left. I think there's aspects of that I want to attach myself to. Although I do have my political leanings, but do understand that it's completely a mess, unfortunately. But yeah, if you would just share with everyone where they can go if they visit you at followthemoney.com, and more importantly, what they can expect to find.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I'd love for all of your listeners to go to followthemoney.com and just type in their email. We will send you lots of free videos and lots of free content if you just want to learn more about us. I have a great video that I'll send you if you give us your email that will come right to you. It's a video that I did on the greatest traders of our generation. Really nice video. We also have other videos on many other things as well. Also, we currently have a special on a brand new swing trading course. If you like to swing trade stocks or ETFs or cryptocurrencies, and swing trading is, for those unfamiliar, it's short-term trading, or maybe you like to swing trade commodities. Well, then you can certainly pick up that brand new swing trading course. It's only $7 right now, so it's an absolute steal. And it's a really, it's a 75-minute video that walks you through step by step the process of swing trading. We have many, many other resources, a free podcast that we do for everyone. We also have lots and lots of video coaching and things like that for people who are real serious. But no matter what you're trying to do to get ahead in your financial world, followthemoney.com can help. We're here to serve, and you can learn more about us there, followthemoney.com. And Kenneth, I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate you bringing me on.
Absolutely. We will do this again in very short order. Jerry, thanks for coming on the show with me today.